All right, and last but not least, we have us. Hey, guys, we should be talking to each other. We're all doing very similar things. That's my big takeaway so far. Oh, Jim needs his flash drive. All right, I'm going to do the mortal sin here and just yank it out. So there.
Okay. It was painful.
All right.
Switch back and forth.
Yeah, so I'm Sam Dunlap, and I'm joined by my partner Nash Leef here, and we are here to talk about our combined effort called Carbon Dynamics LLP. So we're going to talk about who we are, where did carbon dynamics come from, and then we're going to talk about a few case studies with some of the cities that we're working with on our municipal biochar projects. I'm going to just drive from here for now.
Okay, go for it.
So I'm going to talk for a few, and then I'll turn it over to Nash. We'll do a little back and forth. So Jim alluded to the Bloomberg Philanthropies grant. So Cincinnati, Lincoln, and Minneapolis were the three Bloomberg cities, the three US Bloomberg cities, I should say. There were 4 European cities as well. And Minneapolis is unique in that they are running theirs in-house. Lincoln and Cincinnati both went with the PPP, the public-private partnership model. So I am the private operator for the Cincinnati Biochar project, and Nash was in that same position, that same role in Lincoln. And so we started just talking shop, all 3 cities, but Nash and I in particular, just because our models were the same. And part of that was talking shop, but also commiserating because there can be some pain points involved in any biochar project, but in municipal ones in particular. But some of the things the realizations we had are that biochar projects are complex, especially in a municipal context. There's a need for municipal biochar. Municipalities operate with their own unique set of structures that require, knowledge of how those work, and that our experience in that space has value and that it can be applied elsewhere. So we started looking for opportunities to come together to do that work elsewhere. So that's where the idea of carbon dynamics came from, and we just started putting feelers out there informally, but what we found was some folks started finding us. And so that the first project that we'll talk about under that banner of our combined entity here is in Douglas County, Colorado, but Nash will be discussing that one later. But there we go. Kind of our tagline here is municipal biochar for community benefit. So what do I mean by that? So we're talking about projects in which the benefit to the community is the leading reason for being. They're less about a return on investment, and we realized that the benefits will look different for the different communities that they're in. And our experience in the municipal context so far has been that the benefits to the community can get diluted or sacrificed when it's a purely privately run operation. So, in the context of a municipality, there's all sorts of ways that biochar can be beneficial. So we talk about solving local problems, using local materials, and generating local solutions. And as some of the previous speakers have talked about, biochar can be relevant for waste management, urban forestry and tree canopy, stormwater management, drought and flood mitigation, mitigating urban heat island effect, wildfire threat mitigation, increased food security, carbon reduction, and brownfield remediation. There's so many ways that are relevant in a municipal context. And so we see that and municipalities have the onus to take care of their citizenry. So there is a high need, and municipalities can really stand to benefit very well from all of these attributes of biochar. And it's also true that the structure of a municipality can be difficult to penetrate. We found it unlikely that a municipality is going to say, hey, we'll we're just going to start buying a bunch of biochar to meet all of these benefits. We think that it's an easier structure to penetrate if the municipality itself is saying, yeah, we're going to start producing it, and we're going to figure out a way for our different departments to use that material. They're on the hook. They've got skin in the game. And so that's really what the model that we're trying to develop with our partner cities. The challenge, however, is that the world of developing a biochar project is complex. There's a very complex set of relationships involved. A lot of different vendors that you have to work with for each different piece, and it can be a very slow project. I joke that, I presented at the West Virginia Biochar Conference, 2.5 years ago. I was there discussing the forthcoming Cincinnati Biochar project. I had full head of hair and I was not graying, and now I'm losing my hair and I'm graying, and I'm still talking about the forthcoming Cincinnati Biochar project. So they can be slow. So our solution that we are trying to generate here is something to cut through that more easily. So we're trying to create a model based on this public-private partnership that is more of I hesitate a little bit to use the term turnkey solution because we do want it to be very locally appropriate and informed by that local context, but where we can accelerate the process and help answer some of these unknowns and make it a little more straightforward for a municipality to develop a biochar project. So in short, that is what we're working on together as Carbon Dynamics LLP. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nash to start getting into some of the case study material here, and we'll try to touch upon lessons learned. And so there's a lot of lessons learned in this first one. So Nash, take it away with Lincoln.
Yeah, and Sam, if you don't mind, I'll have you just continue running slides here, and I'll
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Hey y'all, Nash Leef, you want to cue up the Lincoln here?
Whoops. Oh. Jump 2.
All right, so this is Lincoln, Nebraska. This is where I've been for about the last decade. I grew up right out here in the middle of nowhere, the big empty it's sometimes called, but ended up out in Lincoln. Just kind of giving a brief overview here so folks can recognize when you hear Lincoln, Cincinnati, Minneapolis are the 3 Bloomberg cities in the US. One is definitely a standout. One is a smaller metro. It is not a root of a larger sort of urban agglomeration. The only thing you could attach onto Lincoln is Omaha, about 45 miles down the way, with a combined population of approximately 1.5 million in between those 2 cities. But it should be noted that they're sort of the anchor for the region. So Lincoln punches above its weight. Sam, if you want to move on here. And it is a planned capital, just like our Washington, D.C. It was built in a floodplain. So that was the initial sort of impetus for the Lincoln Biochar program. So if you want to go to the next slide here, Sam. Sorry, we're going to go through really fast because we have a tight timeline here. I can talk about any of these components and have talked about any of these components for a full presentation. But in 2015, there was a huge flood. It impacted much of southeastern Nebraska. Nebraska itself means flat waters. We sort of exist within a vast series of floodplains. It was really hitting the most impoverished folks within the city. 13 million in damage, but that really doesn't underscore how much of an impact it was on sort of the spirit of the city, because it was 13 million in damage only because it was impacting houses that were already on the edge of being condemned in sort of historically underprivileged neighborhoods in the university area. And so a UNL professor, seeing this right outside the university, brought forward the statement that essentially this could have been prevented had we invested more in our watersheds, and specifically soil carbon within those watersheds. And that's how the biochar project was born here. So this is just looking at the urban wood waste in Lincoln. I know people hear Nebraska, they think there are no trees, it is vast open prairies. You're kind of right. But in this small pocket, we are the Arbor Day state. So Lincoln, Omaha, Lincoln was the first tree city, so really big pride in our urban forestry. That was another really big part of that program. Nebraska is the headquarters of the Arbor Day Foundation. They were a really great partner throughout all of this process. And this is just sort of giving an idea of scale here. So we're going to zoom on by, if you don't mind, Sam. We also had partners in manufacturing, so there was just a lot of, these are pucks here from a telephone pole manufacturer nearby. They had a warehouse of this that was cleared out intermittently and just burned, open piles. So we had a lot of feedstock, especially in our area, that was needing to go to a beneficial use. And again, kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, the Great Plains Biochar Initiative had been going since I think 2015, off of Forest Service grants to really push forward biochar in the Great Plains, where we're tackling some problems we'll talk on a little bit later. So the origins here with the Bloomberg cities, it started out in transportation utilities. It was really kind of a project, and I think the 3 Bloomberg cities can all relate in some ways, that we all had leaders who kind of pushed it forward, and then once it actually got traction, you had to sort of bring it up to the higher ups, and I think Jim said it, and we had the exact same experience. They say, we're doing what now? We signed up for building a biochar facility. I've never heard of this at all, and so we obviously had to bring people up to speed. So interestingly started in transportation utilities, which is essentially public works for the city of Lincoln. Really big department, touches on a lot of different places, but solid waste is sort of where it originally landed and where it ended up. But eventually it was passed on to the mayor's office. It became a mayoral priority. And that was sort of a blessing and a curse at once at the first couple of years of our timeline, which if you want to skip on to the next, I think that's probably the timeline. Oh no, that's just a pretty shot. You guys can watch that. If you click that, it should start to play. So we had really great champions in the mayor's office. We finally got the attention we were hoping for the first few years. It was really hard for us to get attention from city officials. It was hard to find funding. We were always on a shoestring budget. They were pushing forward some really great opportunities though. Because of how Nebraska works, it's kind of a funky state. It's a unicameral. Cities have a lot of power. They can annex other towns around them without consent. So it's pretty funky. They ended up with about 2,000 acres of farmland. So to my knowledge, this is the largest farmland biochar trial that's occurring in the United States right now. It's also on about a 10-year time span, and that's all on city land. That's land that the city has reserved for future facilities, for future growth. And so for now, they're letting us use biochar trials out there. So really cooperative in some regards, but it was always hard to get attention until we ended up at the mayor's office, and then we started to get a little bit of pushback. If you go on to the next.
Yep.
You can go ahead and play this. Yeah.
Okay.
I just know that we're tight on time here.
Yeah.
So,
Better scoot it along.
So we got a little bit of pushback, just because solid waste already has so much on their plate. But in the end, we pushed through, and we actually got this BET unit delivered on site, and it is still in Lincoln. So I think we're the first city to have it delivered, and we're kind of on track to be the first to start up. So we thought, but we had a program that was almost entirely federally funded. So in 2021, I count that as the beginning of the Bloomberg Challenge. We've got the feasibility study that was completed in 2022. That was a real landmark because I think the other Bloomberg cities really tacked on to that. But we were securing funding all the way up into 2024. Eventually ended up being about 80 to 90% federally funded, mostly through Forest Service, but then also through Inflation Reduction Act funds. And so eventually, unfortunately, in February of 2025, we actually got federal funding cut as a result of the Trump administration's actions. And so the Inflation Reduction Act was supposed to be a huge boon, especially to the state of Nebraska, which got $307 million allocated primarily to green agriculture funds, which is what this was based off of, at least a decent portion of it outside of the Forest Service funds. And it is lost, essentially. We are unable to tap it as a municipality any longer. So that was the end of the Lincoln Biochar Initiative. Is there another slide here?
Nope.
Okay.
On to Cincinnati.
All right.
All right. So potentially to be revived in a different form in the future, but to be determined on Lincoln. But we'll get to the silver lining with Nash there shortly, but I'll take a moment to talk about the Cincinnati Biochar Project. So this is our leading department in Cincinnati is parks, but it's grounded within the overall sustainability plan for Cincinnati, and that's coming through the Office of Environment and Sustainability. Every 5 years, I think it is, they do a new Green Cincinnati plan, so that spells out the city's goals for sustainability and carbon reduction. But we have a very distinct story and narrative to tell here about environmental justice, and one of the mandates of the Parks Department is urban forestry falls within parks. And every 10 years they do a urban tree canopy inventory, and that the results of that set up what the goals are for the subsequent 10 years in terms of tree planting. And Cincinnati has a 40% tree canopy coverage goal, which overall we have hit as a city, but that is very, there's a lot of disparity in how that canopy looks. So that's hence the focus on the tree equity. And one of the challenges is that trees can be very hard to establish in these spots where they aren't already in an urban environment. They call that, and the Parks Department has jurisdiction over the right-of-way, 85,000 street trees that they maintain. So they're also the source of our feedstock. But they call that strip between the street and the sidewalk, that's the death strip. But that's what they have to plant in. So we are going to utilize biochar to try to make it the life strip. And then we also have stormwater ambitions with that. But Parks is really leading the charge here. So these are the schematics of our facility. The red thing is a shredder. Then the big gray boxes are walking floor trailer, and then the skinny gray box to the right of that is our BET PRD. BET is getting a lot of action here in this conference, but we've all chosen them, I think, for good reason. And then up in the top right, you can see is that blue box is our ORC. So we do have an electrotherm ORC. And the Office of Environment and actually I'll jump to this partner slide. The Office of Environment and Sustainability has been really important in that piece of bringing on the energy capture. We are utilizing Inflation Reduction Act dollars for that, but you have to front the money. So OES is providing the bridge loan for that to happen. Groundwork, Ohio River Valley. Groundwork is a national nonprofit that does a lot of green workforce development in urban contexts, and so they are our workforce development partner. The Great Parks is the Hamilton County park system, and they are bringing on a compost facility at one of their parks. They have a demonstration farm with an equestrian center, and then also just different animals. A couple cows, a couple chickens kind of thing. So we're going to take the manure from that facility. It will be composted along with the biochar that the city is producing, and then that finished product will go to benefit both parks entities for their various green space management activities. From a timeline perspective here, you can read it for yourself, but the exciting news right now is that our equipment will be delivered on October 2nd, so it's coming up soon. However, the building still needs to go up to house that equipment, so it's going to be under a tarp for a little bit. But we are getting there. It has been a long journey, but I think one of the learnings for me is that this is very much, the park board sees this as being on the bleeding edge of innovation from a municipality standpoint, and I think that's true, but it's also not necessarily a mission critical thing for them. It's all in due time. So that's, and the parks director is like, we're going to do it right. We're not going to do it fast. And he's holding up his end of the bargain there. So let's see, anything I missed there? Well, we can cover it in Q&A if I missed anything. So I'm going to pass it back to Nash to talk about Douglas County. But this is just a couple shots of a recent tree planting for Arbor Day, and the picture on the right, the tall guy next to the tree, that's the Cincinnati mayor. So he's all in on biochar, but he's not the one steering the ship at the same time. Oops. All right, go ahead.
All right, just knowing that we have to crunch these guys into such small time slots, it's so hard to encapsulate years of a project so small. So the Lincoln project, the Cincinnati project, Sam and I had been working together, and we were looking for a way to bring the lessons we learned to a new project to sort of hopefully prove that because we stepped on every single rake along the way, we could help other folks avoid it. And Douglas County, Colorado was the first opportunity we had there. So I just sort of highlight here that it's sort of out in my neck of the woods, so it was something where I felt really confident that I could be boots on the ground. I'm a 7th generation Coloradan, so it also gave me an excuse to be out and seeing family more. And furthermore, it's a similar sized population base, similar sized tax base, so I always thought that that was a really interesting sort of analogy with Lincoln. Next slide here. Next, there we go. All right, so we approached Douglas County when they had a RFEI come out, and it was also our first time kind of coming in as a partnership. So not only a partnership as an LLP, but we'd also developed sort of industry connections along the way. So we came in with Complete Solutions, standing here in the back, which are great equipment vendors. And we'd worked with them on both the Lincoln and Cincinnati projects. And so we kind of came in with this pretty structured approach saying, here's how we can see this project moving forward at twice the speed as Lincoln and Cincinnati. But the main issue that we're trying to solve here is pretty different. It's wildfire risk, first and foremost. That is the mitigation, that is the goal of the facility, wildfire mitigation. And you can see that that's essentially the entire county is painted red. It's a really risky area, and furthermore, it's a fairly wealthy county, and so you have a lot of folks who are in that wildlife-urban interface, who are up in the mountains, who are up in the trees, and who are dealing with properties that are at high wildfire risk. If you move on to the next. And so they have a really robust wildfire mitigation plan that the biochar facility fits into really neatly. But they've already been doing such great work, such sort of nation-leading work in making sure that folks within Douglas County are staying safe from wildfires and making sure that they're creating a positive ecological impact. Next slide. This is just a little bit of tree trimming here, and this is their aerial fire suppression copter that the county actually owns. So pretty advanced stuff. This project's really fascinating because it is also kind of in partnership with the Pike San Isabel National Forest. So that's where a lot of the feedstock for this project's coming from. It is a larger scale than the Lincoln and Cincinnati projects in Minneapolis insofar as its throughput goes, because it is essentially tapping some of that national forest land. And there's just that interface between folks who live within the county and the national forest at sort of every level. So we're looking at a kind of two-phase approach here, with the build intentionally leaving space for a second unit to run in line, a second BET unit, with the anticipation that the first unit's going to process about 10,000 tons of feedstock per year with no energy capture. And they're also eliminating some other programs. So that's another one of the reasons that this project works really well, is because there's some cost savings built in. So they already have a slash mulch program. They already have a green waste recycling program, but they're paying a lot for it. And so by wrapping that into what's essentially a greater public works campus attached to a landfill, they're hoping that they can immediately seize those cost savings and then help this facility pay for itself over time. Furthermore, we had a little bit of trouble getting the Forest Service to give us some really solid numbers on that feedstock. So when we were planning out this facility, we were always, will they, won't they, on if we're going to have enough feedstock to run 2 trains. And then when the groundbreaking happened, we got them on camera saying, you know, we have all of this feedstock that we're hoping to send to this facility.
100,000 tons.
Exactly. So we got really great numbers from them there, and that was a really positive step forward. So that is sort of an official plan at this point. And we are moving much more quickly. When you compare it to the Lincoln and Cincinnati and Minneapolis timelines, we have been able to eliminate a lot of those holdups. We were able to just move at that breakneck pace that we were hoping we could accomplish. And that's partially because another key component that I wish Sam and I could touch on more are the teams that we're dealing with. So oftentimes biochar is touching on so many different aspects of a municipality, of a county, from parks to solid waste to public works. It is just everyone kind of has a piece of the pie, and you need everyone to buy in as much as you can. Douglas County has a really incredible system where they have a special project manager. And that special project manager is assigned to the team, and they are essentially trying to push forward a project that doesn't necessarily have its home in any one department or is going to be touching on multiple projects. And so that has been a real key in making sure that everyone is aligned, everyone is moving in lockstep, and they just have a really great team to push these kinds of things forward at such breakneck speed. So, anything else?
No, I've just got some. If you have any closing reflections, you can. I've got a few things, but go ahead.
No. I think that it's really. We wish we could talk about it all day. We're really happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, just a couple things that I'll, just to kind of cue up the Q&A here is, I mentioned this with Cincinnati, but, you know, I mentioned it not being mission critical, and that's really a distinction between Cincinnati and Douglas County is, Douglas County, it is mission critical. This is a wildfire mitigation project, and they need a place to take this biomass now. So, and there's also a political reason for, you know, there's a county commissioner who wants this to happen on his watch. So, you know, there's some forces at play that are making this move very quickly. You know, something, I think, one thing I want to point out right now, just kind of to tip my hat to Jim, something that we've learned a lot. You know, we don't pretend that we can do this alone. And so we, you know, I participate in the MNBI calls, and I'm really impressed with the groundwork that Jim and Cole and their partners have been able to lay to really make their biochar project, you know, develop the ecosystem within which it can be, you know, come to fruition. And I'm having a harder time in Cincinnati with that, you know, to the point above here about insiders or outsiders. You know, in Cincinnati, I'm part of certain conversations, but I'm not part of all of the conversations. So I feel like I'm a bit of an outsider. Whereas in Douglas County, we're at every meeting. There are critical, like the head of public works is at every meeting with us. You know, we're in the room, and that is making a big difference to the way that the project feels and the pace at which we can move. And so there is that coalition of stakeholders. We have a drumbeat that we're meeting at, and we're getting stuff done. And then obviously there's a question of money. Is there money? And in Douglas County, that answer was yes. Cincinnati, we're still, there's going to be a gap once the building goes out to bid, but there are distinct ways of closing that. So there's just a few reflections on, you know, just some of our experiences so far. But with that, any questions that folks would like to throw out there? Yeah.
So I'm from Colorado. I've heard about that project. It's super awesome project. I was wondering if you could talk about the full supply chain. So what happens to the biochar? Is the community going to maybe put that back in the forest, or what's the model there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the supply chain right now is currently being developed. So a lot of the community partnerships are still underway. Of course, you're trying to strike a balance between getting people really excited and saying the biochar is going to be here, you know, what are we going to do with it? And you're also trying not to, you know, warm people up, and then they say, you know, where can we buy it? So right now, we've done a few partnerships with injection into golf courses, especially because they are using so much water. So I think that's a really big part of the project, is how to integrate the biochar into land use so that it can reduce water impact. That was a big part of the project out in Lincoln as well. So Lincoln is a sort of semi-arid city, and so there was some really interesting conversations going on there that we hope to sort of transplant out to the Front Range in new developments. So for example, you know, when we're talking about incentives for builders to utilize biochar in new developments, we think that there's a really great opportunity there to have everyone benefit. So the short answer is we're working on it. The long answer is, you know, we're trying everything we can. So.
One thing that I meant to mention and didn't was that part of the reason we think municipal biochar is, you know, there's been questions about the model of, you know, building a successful and profitable biochar business. And something that we're seeing, I think Jim may have talked about it, and it's certainly the case in Douglas County, is that costs averted in one department can be attributed as revenue for the project. So we can do some cost accounting to lighten the burden to have the biochar move at maximum, you know, at maximum cost. So that is something that is part of this municipal biochar model for us, and I think makes a lot of sense.
Can you just restate that last stage one more time?
Basically saying costs averted, like, you know, part of the Cincinnati model is to increase tree survival. They lose 20 to 30% of their young trees planted. So they spend money to replace them. The savings that we anticipate gaining in Cincinnati by virtue of not having to replace those trees can be attributed as project revenue for the biochar piece. Dan!
Hey, for those of us that are inspired by your story and Nash's story, how are you guys monetizing your efforts? Is it consulting fees? Is it participation in savings? What are you doing?
It depends on where. I mean, so our model basically is a two-phase thing. Phase one is planning and design. That's just consultation. That transitions into operations, which is a contract to operate, and there can be some revenue sharing as part of that arrangement. Outside of Douglas County and Cincinnati, we're going to be reliant on local operational partners to do it. We're not trying to be the boots on the ground everywhere. So that's something that we are working on developing as the opportunities arise. Oh, yeah, yellow lanyard right here. Yeah.
So, I saw that, like, for Lincoln, you were associated with the transportation, like, Lincoln transportation, and then for Minneapolis, it was health. So, like, how does that, how do you determine, like, who you're talking to, or is it just, like, the first person that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it was the first person who showed interest. That was the initial starting point. Then we got moved to the mayor's office. And then the mayor's office, interestingly, Lincoln, Douglas County, both more conservative districts. And so no sustainability departments really. No like strong driver for carbon sequestration necessarily. It's really about community impact. It's about waste diversion. And so we're talking in sort of different ways than Minneapolis, which I'm oftentimes kind of jealous of, because they can just say, like, our goal is to reduce the carbon footprint. And that is, I think, a really great thing that they have, that in the two entities that I've worked with, it's always been about mitigation of solid waste, landfill avoidance, and all about community impact, which are also really great goals. It's just kind of different nuts to crack. So.
All right, I think if there's any other questions, you guys can come find us, but it is lunchtime, I believe. So thank you all very much. Thank you to all the speakers. And BET unit in Lincoln is, Nash. Come and talk to Nash.
Yeah, come talk to me.
Talk about that. Everybody else, you're free. Go to lunch. We'll talk to you there.